Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., an equally remarkable woman, Coretta Scott King. He lives in Atlanta. He graduated and studied and focused his entire life mission on peace and negotiations. He was an elected official for those who followed politics, and then he eventually resigned from his domestic political role to take a more global active role, and he started to work with another Atlanta individual, President Carter, doing monitoring of elections around the world. So he was, for example, very actively involved in South Africa. I met a lovely South African gentleman a moment ago. In fact, when Mandela was sworn in as the first ever democratically elected president, in that way for all the population, he was literally next to Nelson Mandela in that moment. He now dedicates the majority of his time to negotiating peace and conflict situations around the world. And then when he returns home to America, he dedicates his time to the work that he does at the Drum Major Institute. For those of you who aren't aware, that was originally founded by his father and his father's legal counsel to pay the bail bonds for the Freedom Riders, originally during the Civil Rights era. His latest initiative, what he's going to talk to us a little bit about, is this beautiful campaign to honor the 100th anniversary of the birth of his father. So in 2029, it'll be 100 years to mark the birth of Dr. King. And he has this bold dream to help the America, particularly, the globally, but especially America, to create what Dr. King called the beloved community. And the beloved community is the idea of all races, all creeds, all people. Sir, please come on in. All people coming together in service through 100 million hours of service. And we'll learn a little bit more about this. But can I ask a favor? Can we please welcome Mr. King with a round of applause? Thank you, sir. Thank you. Sir, how are you?
Good. How's everyone?
Good. So I was sharing a little bit about your role in elected office and your work now in globally around the world and helping to advance democracy, peace building. But if it's acceptable, and I've known this man now for over a decade and thousands of hours together, but I still will always call him Mr. King, just out of reverence and respect for what this man has done and what his family has done. So Mr. King, is it all right, though, if we maybe take a giant step back? And before we talk about Realize the Dream, before we talk about all the incredible, to talk a little bit about your personal journey and your family's journey?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Mr. King, we, of course, know how extraordinary your father is, how extraordinary your mother is, but I've come to realize how extraordinary you are. And that is forged through a life that has not been easy. And so I'm going to go straight to it because this is the advantage of two people talking and knowing each other a long time. And I know this may seem impolite to jump straight in, but there was a moment that shaped your course of your life and where you chose to dedicate yourself to service that was forged at a very young age when your father was taken from you. Can you take us back to that moment? And can you take us back to that conversation with your mother?
I could. But in all seriousness, clearly all of us in life go through various experiences. And perhaps the most traumatic incident of my life was at the time my father was killed on April 4th of 1968. I was 10 years old. My older sibling, Yolanda, was 12 years old. My younger brother, Dexter, was 7, and my younger sister, Bernice, was 5. We were sitting in our den watching television, and it was announced about 7:05 p.m. by, I believe it might have been Walter Cronkite. And he said, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. has just been shot. It was not immediately clear if he had died. So we ran back to Mom and Dad's room. where Mom was really getting prepared to go to Memphis to join my father, be by my father's side. And she didn't know much at the time, other than he'd been shot, and it was pretty bad. She received a call from Ambassador Andrew Young, as well as Jesse Jackson, and she headed to the airport. I just remember a lot of people arriving in our home from, I guess, the community, because we didn't have internet then, but it seemed like it as quickly as people arrived. She went to the airport. She got to the airport, and when she was preparing or getting ready to board her flight, she stopped in the restroom. And when she came out, a man was walking toward her, and in the distance she could see that that man, as he got closer, was the mayor of Atlanta. And she also instinctively knew that as he was walking toward her, his body language was saying something that was not going to be comforting. And he did say to her, you know, Dr. King passed, did not make it. And so she decided that she wanted to come back home that night. She was still went to Memphis ultimately, I think a day later, to come and share with us, because when she got back home, which was probably around 9 o'clock or 9:30, the three older ones of us were still awake. My younger sister had gone to sleep. And she said in substance, your father has gone home to live with God. When you see him, he will not be able to hug and kiss you as he often did. But one day we will see him again. And that was the essence. It was much more conversation than that. We probably talked another 30 or 45 minutes with her, attempting to answer, you know, a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 7-year-old's questions. So our lives changed dramatically from my mom to us in a matter of just a few hours. Now, I certainly can't say that I knew at that time that my life would be dedicated to service. But what I can say is, if I had not had those examples of mother and dad, because obviously my mom lived many more years and I had an opportunity to travel with her around the world, my siblings and I, and the work that I saw them doing, I'm certain inspired me greatly to engage in social justice, is what I would call it. And so I have led civil and human rights organizations most of my life. I was an elected official for a short time. I don't know if all of you are from California, but I was a supervisor, which is a county commissioner. So at the county level of government, I served for about 7 years. But I also ran organizations from the Martin Luther King Jr. Center to Nonviolent Social Change, which my mother, family, and friends founded to institutionalize the work of my father, to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which my father was the president of and was a co-founder in 1957, the year I was born, to an organization called Realizing the Dream, which is now a concept. It was an organization for a period of time, and also finally the Drum Major Institute and the Martin Luther King III Foundation. So I'm involved with a lot of different organizations today, but all of them complement the other in relationship to mission and message, because part of our challenge and task is to really create a more just, humane, and fair world for all, and particularly for generations yet unborn. And as I had a front row seat to the modern civil rights movement. My father and mother were partners from day one. I may tell that story later if it's prompted.
I wanted to take a moment to take us into history, and I love that we are standing room only and the people who have been joining this gathering. Mr. King, what I think is so extraordinary, though, is a series of life choices you make, yes, in public service, and yes, in being an elected official, and yes, in now the role as a global statesman and mediator and democracy, the work that you've done, and we'll talk about Realize the Dream, of course. But if I could also take one step back, what most people don't know, and I get the chance to see this, is standing outside that door and standing outside that door are two security bodyguards. And there's a very specific reason why they're there, and why they are there not purely for just what happened to his father. And in there, I'm going to ask, again, this is the advantage of knowing you as well as I do, sir, another difficult question, if I might. Because actually I want to drive to one of the things that is so extraordinary about you, and I promise I'll get to it. Can you tell us a little bit about, your uncle, and can you tell us a little bit about your grandmother?
Certainly. Thank you. My father was killed April 4th, as I said, 1968. My uncle, my father's brother, mysteriously drowned in July of 1969, so a year after Dad. My grandmother, my father's mother, was gunned down in Ebenezer Church while playing the Lord's Prayer. A deranged man came into the church and killed her. Now, what's most interesting is all of us will go through various circumstances within our lives, and it is probably a choice as to how we choose to embrace and go forward, because into all of our lives a little rain is going to fall, and it's not so much that happens, but what you do after that happens. So what I'm thankful for, and I hope that I always exude and exhibit this level of energy when I mean, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that. I could have been a very hostile and bitter person. Would have been easy to do. And maybe some would have understood intellectually. But I chose a different method of not just sharing, but engagement. When a parent is taken from you at 10 years old, and you know that they are advocating love, and yet a violent, hostile environment causes them to be killed, it could change your trajectory. But my grandfather, I remember him saying, "I refuse to allow any man to reduce me to hatred. The man that killed my lovely wife, nor the man that killed my son. I love everyone. I'm every man's brother." He went all over the world those years, from 1974 until he died in 1984. 10 years as a Baptist preacher. It's one thing to preach to your parishioners this message of love and forgiveness, but when this kind of incident, traumatic incident, enters your life, and you're still able to get up and advocate love and forgiveness, when you directly experience something that may cause some to go one way or the other. So, I had to make a choice, but I learned, and I had examples. Our church, where reinforcement began. First it was taught by my mother and my father in the home, reinforced through church, Sunday school. And then even more reinforced by the examples of my grandfather and my aunts and uncles. Of course, my mom first, but I think that, and I hope, because every week I'm in a school somewhere talking to young people. And again, that's the light that I choose to share in relationship to how to navigate through complex, tragic and traumatic situations. And I'm not saying, well, this is how you ought to do this. I'm only sharing what worked for me. And my thinking is that we as a world community and as a nation and world have to learn to forgive, because, you know, later on in life I learned and heard my father say, darkness will never put out darkness. Only light can do that. Amen. Violence will never stomp out violence. Only love and nonviolence can do that. So we have, in my judgment, we need to grow from a consciousness standpoint as a society. And, you know, right now, particularly, as we approach Election Day, we really do have some choices to make. And I think that they're difficult choices for many different reasons. But it feels, the tension in society, it feels like, Dad would say we must learn nonviolence or we might face non-existence. I don't want to have to say that, but that's what it feels like. So how do we collectively come together and change that energy? Because I remember not too long ago where we used to disagree without being disagreeable. So it doesn't mean we have to always agree on everything. We don't. But we have to find a way to engage in a civil manner of disagreeing, because that probably is sustainable.
So I'm just going to hold space for just one moment. And Mr. King, I know you were so gracious to say that tribute to your grandfather and for his ability to forgive, for his ability to move forward in love. And this is why, and candidly, only because we know each other this well, I felt it was remotely appropriate to start with those two questions, because they are, you know, deeply traumatic questions, obviously. But I wanted to ensure that this group understood that what is remarkable about this man, yes, is that it's one of the most famous families in modern history. And yes, there's thousands of schools and streets and libraries that bear his father's name. And as extraordinary as Martin Luther King Jr., the icon, in preaching love, in preaching nonviolence, in his individual life, he wasn't tested in the way that this man was actually tested. To have to make that ultimate choice when your father and your uncle and your grandmother, and still, and this is why I have the privilege and honor, as I say it, is, you know, to work together on this initiative. We were talking about Realize the Dream, because this man is continuing to embody his father and embody himself in this incredible act of love. And you hinted about politics, and I'm not going to ask about politics. But you have been an advisor to, you know, for now 30 years, every president, you know, Democrat, Republican, everyone elected. People seek your counsel around the world. And you spoke about the division today in America, and that led this man over here to applaud the we can disagree without being disagreeable, which brings us to what America needs now. And you are leading a movement for what America needs now. And so can you share with us a little bit about your movement, Realize the Dream, and your vision for America?
So, Realize the Dream is an initiative that my wife and I came and talked about with Craig and his brother Mark, who, as he stated, I've known for about a dozen years. And I saw the models that they were creating in Canada and in the United States and the UK at a minimum. That's just a part of the world that they've touched. And I've had the opportunity to participate with them, seeing change manifesting before my eyes, because I did, of the many, many more that they did, I did at least 35 events with them around the world. And in each event, one of the aspects, this is just one of the many things, they would bring together, the organization would bring together 10, 15, 20,000 kids. I think the largest one may have been in the UK at Wimberley, so that might have been more like 50,000. 20,000 people, on average, somewhere between 18 and 20,000 kids between the age of 12 and 18. And so they organized these students so that they would look at things from not just a me perspective, but from me to we, to really create what my dad would have termed as the beloved community. So each of these young people would find their voices doing something to make the world better, just a little something. But when you join one with others, it was monumental. And I used to say, when I first started back in 2012, after a few of them done in Canada, I said, when this gets to the United States, and once it's institutionalized, it's going to be a tectonic shift that's created in the consciousness, because you see personal development as well as helping others to develop what they want. It becomes connected, and it gives one's life value and purpose and meaning. And so and at that time, even then, I was saying, one day I want to do something with these guys on a bigger level. So my wife and I, as we were getting closer to the 100th anniversary of Dad's birth, which is 2029, so about 2 years ago, we sat down with these guys and said, hey, could we do a monumental project that hopefully will bring us as a nation closer? Back then, even 2 or 3 years ago, we weren't quite, we were divided. We've been divided for a while, but we're not at the level that we are now. And of course, when we first asked, they said, well, we're not sure. We don't think so right now. But then he talked to some other people.
We were intimidated by the scale of his vision. He sits down and says, let's bring America together. And go,
You see, he's a little defensive, right?
I'm actually giving praise where praise is. His vision is that big.
But in all seriousness, we knew that these were the only folks we knew that had the capacity to help us create more and engage and get this vision to be transformed. And so they said yes. And we've been working on it now for almost 2 years as we go around our nation, encouraging people to turn to each other and stop turning on each other. And we believe, and again, this is not saying to anyone, hey, you need to do this. We're saying, what speaks to your heart in this nation? Whether it's addressing mental health, whether it's dealing with the environment, whether it's tutoring, whether it's helping seniors, whatever it is, whether it's helping the homeless, all of us can do something a little bit to make the world a little better than it is. And so that's what this movement is, getting people to turn to each other. You start, my father and my mother often focused on, like lasers, that which is good in each one of us. Because even if, hypothetically, if you're 90% bad, there's 10% good that we can find. Focus like a laser on that and work to extract the good. And you start small, and it grows. So that's what this is about, a movement of doing that which is good, just, and right in our nation and world to bring about change. And I think King Holiday is observed in some way, form, or fashion in over 100 countries around the world. And so it's interesting to me that as I travel around the world, I remember when I was in Bosnia, my mom used to tell me this, but maybe about 10 years ago, I was in Bosnia, and the second largest city in Bosnia is the name of it is Tuzla. And as we were in Eastern Europe, where the only African Americans that were ever seen were probably those in the military. So the second largest city in Bosnia, Tuzla, is the city hall is on Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. So you say, how do you go figure? What it says is the message of Martin Luther King Jr. transformed beyond ethnicity. So I used to try to create a little example. Dad spoke in universal themes, If I step on your toe in the United States or in China or Russia, it still hurts. The pain is the same. So he was able to connect through not just his verbiage, but certainly his verbiage to help people understand. You know, we are interconnected. He often said that, you know, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I can't be what I ought to be until you're what you ought to be. And our destinies are tied together. And I think instinctively we as humans know that. I mean, children do not come in the world being racist. That is taught and reinforced. Children, there may be some children we know who are more aggressive or something, but they're kids. They're just kids. And that's what they want to be. But unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, our society socializes in a certain way, and then we embrace certain kinds of things, sometimes that are very good, but sometimes that really are not that good. So it's just interesting to look and evaluate. My wife and I have a 16-year-old daughter, and I want to share one thing. Can I do it? About her, because she's an activist at heart. And she was very touched. I don't know, when she 2-3 years old, she was talking about building houses for the homeless. And I think she was 8 at this time. No, maybe she was 7. She was 7. And when she was 7, you know, President Obama was just about in his last year of office. And although we'd been to the White House innumerable times, I don't know, 20, 25 times, we'd never gone into the Oval Office to see the bust of Dad. So his last year in office, in 2016, he invited us into the Oval Office. And we said to Yolanda, you got to come up with a question for the president. And we didn't say anything else. So her question to the president was, Mr. President, what are you going to do about these guns? And this was before Parkland had occurred. Parkland, Florida, and 16 persons were killed on that day. And President Obama, you know, he's kind of like a professor sometimes. And he was talking to her, giving her an answer, and she kept looking at him and said, now when are you going to give us the real answer? Literally. I'm sure that's what he, so then he finally started saying things that resonated. She said, oh, okay. Henceforth, a year and a half later, Parkland, Florida occurred, and students and a teacher were killed. And so we were honored because she was invited to say something at the March for Our Lives. I want to tell you what she said as a maybe almost 9-year-old. She said, I'm Yolanda Renee King, granddaughter of Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King. My grandfather had a dream that his 4 little children would live in a world where they would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream also. She said, enough is enough, and we must create a gun-free world. I was like, yeah. Now, mind you, none of this, when she learned that morning, 2 hours before the rally started, we just were going to support the young people. And she said, when my wife was fixing her hair, she said, okay, Yolanda, let's kind of go over your remarks. I know what I'm going to say. In other words, I don't need you all on that issue. And that's why I was blown away. Now, my wife had heard what she told her what she was going to say. Now, my only point is, out of the mouths of babes, before something can happen, it has to be deposited into the universe. So she made this statement, understanding that, no, this is not going to happen tomorrow. But if you don't have the consciousness that it can happen, it never will happen. And we in the United States have bigger challenges. Other nations have guns. Everybody hunts. But why did they not have, are we just that mentally ill-capacitated that, something we got to do on this issue. And we as a nation have to do it. It can't be one segment of society. It has to be a solution that we all can live with. And again, that's where the dialogue comes, as opposed to operating to try to denigrate people because they disagree with you. And then personally, we know the behavior. we're better than that. I mean, as a society, as people, we're so much better than the behavior that we sometimes exhibit. So we have to challenge our leadership to be your best. And that can happen. I mean, that's really what has made us a great nation. So we've got to work to become the society that we ought to be, because good, bad, or indifferent, the world looks to us for leadership. And so it's imperative that we keep creating the climate for leadership to emerge that does share a vision for the future to make us the best nation that we can be, and also not exclude others from becoming what they ought to become.
One thing I deeply admire about you is some people share a message, but you have lived the message through action your entire life. And in a final question, but there will be some additional interaction opportunities, but a final question for now. I'm just going to preamble it a little bit by saying there is this incredible movement you're building, Realize the Dream. This idea of the beloved community bringing America together, which, my God, no matter who's elected, we need it. 100 million hours of service. 100 million hours of service. Bringing people together across different political beliefs, across different religious beliefs, ethnic colors of skin, urban, rural, red, blue, purple, like working side by side on service. Causes we all agree on, causes we all can connect on. 100 million hours is worth $3 billion in social value. I'm going to sing this man's praises for a second because he is too modest to do so. The initiatives that he's built include everything from service curriculum in schools, getting young people across America to serve. They include kits for workplaces, if only there were some great employers, and faith leaders and parents to get youth involved and serve. Platform where you can put in where you live, your geographic region, and get tens of thousands of service opportunities for your causes served up to you. Tracking systems for young people to track this as part of their college applications. Events with the NFL, 32 town halls happening in communities across America. Events with the NBA, volunteer side by side with your favorite player. A podcast series they're rolling out, a book series they're rolling out. All of these incredible resources that officially launch in January 2025. You're getting an advanced peek today of what's coming in a handful of months. And Inauguration Day happens to be MLK holiday in 2025. And so the symbolism of America, no matter who wins, half America's not going to be happy. So bringing America together on that day as they roll out this national campaign with all these great resources. So I'm going to put a challenge to you just for a quick moment, and then I'm going to tee up a final question. And here's my challenge. They say time, treasure, talent. Time, 100 million hours, is only going to happen when business leaders get their employees involved. And whatever service causes you're already supporting, get their faith communities involved. Whatever causes you're already supporting, get their children involved. So your time, your treasure. This takes resources. You are business leaders here. It's going to, we heard just a moment ago, Blair talked about the incredible work that you've done, your incredible fundraising support. This is an initiative that requires individuals to say, I'm not only tired about the negative headlines, I'm going to do something about it. I'm willing to bring America together. I want to invest in service, and I want a great ROI too, because I want $3 billion of social value while healing America at the same time. And then talent. It's going to take community leaders. People willing to put up their hands and say, in Sacramento I'm in Fresno I'm in communities I'm in East Bay, I'm willing to help lead this. So that time, that treasure, and that talent. And so if this is something that motivates and speaks to you, please come up to us. Come up to this man, come up to myself. Because this only happens with your help. And so, Mr. King, for a final question. After all you've lived through, looking at America today, are you hopeful, and why?
Well, I'm absolutely hopeful. Number one, I'm an optimistic person, but I'm also realistic at the same time. I realize that there's a lot of work that we have to do. But I'm hopeful because I believe that this generation, our daughter, she's one person, but there are a lot of young people who are engaged and generation could be one of the greatest generations ever. That's how I feel about them. Let me just share this, put on your hearts. One of the greatest speeches ever delivered is the I Have a Dream speech. All over the world, people know that speech. That's one of the speeches they know. And as the son of Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King, I have listened to that speech thousands of times, but I've only heard it hundreds or less than hundreds. Every time I hear it, it brings me to tears. Now, we listen with our ears, but we hear with our heart. If we can figure out a way to open the hearts of people, there's absolutely nothing that we cannot achieve. And again, it doesn't mean that we have to agree on everything that is going on. But we do have to have a common vision and open up the hearts and humanity. It's humanity that sometimes we ignore for any number of reasons. But we don't have the luxury of ignoring humanity, because there's something amazing happening every day, all day. Now, you have a little problem when your mainstream media's mantra is, if it bleeds, it leads. So that's what I call dysfunctionally functional. In other words, you're sick and you don't know you're sick. So we need to change that. So that, oftentimes I watch David Muir, because at the end of that show on ABC every night, there's a positive, uplifting story. A lot of media, and in the old days, the press would just report on what's happening. Today, our media has a tendency to tell you what they think they want you to see. That's an interesting word, tell you what they want you to see. It does not mean that that's what you're seeing. But if you hear it long enough, if you say it long enough, people believe it. And as I said, we're better. I could be hopefully constructively critical, not destructively, because I don't want to pray and engage and embrace that which is negative. We have to know that negativity is out there, but it's how we choose. You can look at the glass as half empty or half full. It's your own choice. And there are zillion problems, but there are just as many solutions. And we need to look at how we're going to resolve these issues to sustain humanity and Generation Jet on board. So.
Martin Luther King III.
Let's let Mr. King exit, and we're all going to meet him down at the bungalow. But the sooner we get there, the